Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're continuing our series of dinner table talks. We've got a few guests with us, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves one by one.
Hi, my name's Ken. You guys may know me as thiccboigains.
Hi, I'm Josh. I use he, they pronouns, and you would know me as hungry.hungryhimbo on Instagram.
Hi everyone, I'm Adam, and on Instagram, lebeardedgent.
Fabulous. Well, hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to have you all. Some new, some returning, which I don't know. I kind of like that. You know, obviously when we started doing the roundtables, it was very, we want to have just everyone we're familiar with. You know, we want to make sure that everything's kind of all gravy on that. But actually, the opportunity to have so many different combinations of people on is really, really quite fun. So, everyone, today we're going to be talking about a concept that we call Gainshaming. Now, for anyone who follows me personally on Instagram, you'll know that every now and again I like to drop a little, not that she's trying to be an influencer, but it's just like we are a community of bitches who do shit, and sometimes our shit is unique to our experience, and we should have language that reflects that unique experience, right? So today we're talking about Gainshaming, okay? So listen, is everyone ready to get into it today?
Well,
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Fab. Okay. So to kick things off, let's talk a definition, right? We're saying Gainshaming. For me, I'm talking about a very kink-specific experience for gainers, feedies, who have experienced negative interactions with other members of the community, based either on the speed of their weight gain, which for people, they're usually like, you're not gaining fast enough, right? If it's a decision to maintain or even lose weight, if it's gaining muscle instead of fat, if it's, adapting your diet to be healthier. And to be honest, in a way, it almost doesn't matter. Like anything that you do as a decision in your gaining journey, when someone turns around and says, I don't like this, you should do things differently, or I think you're doing it wrong, that's Gainshaming. What are y'all's experiences with this kind of a concept?
My particular experience with it was, especially early on, in getting started in things, was being assumed I was an encourager just because I was skinny. And for relatively, for reference, that I'm about like 6'2", and I started off at like 145 pounds. It was very light. And also I was very unhappy in my body and a little sensitive about that too. Just like, putting all of the whole thing in context. But I think even within that first 30 pounds or so for me, it was difficult for people to like believe like, oh, you're a gainer, you're totally an encourager, and would like put me in that box even after I had told them that I was like actively gaining and wanted to rather focus on that as opposed to like, some other aspect of it. So it can come about in a weird way sometimes, if that makes sense.
For myself, I will say I've had a little bit of a roller coaster of a journey. I kind of went the muscle gainer route when I first came on, but over the time, I've had a lot of individuals who will throw it at me. Oh, you should just quit the gym altogether, and don't worry about going there. You just need to stuff another 1,000 calories in and things like that. Or I've also had instances with throwing unrealistic goals in terms of a weight, and I've always been one to not really stress too much about what the scale says. I mean, lately, yeah, I've been having fun with it, but in my overall goals, what the scale says doesn't matter. It's always about how I feel, how I look to myself, and what I want to do. And so learning how to develop that backbone to be able to fight off those sorts of instances and not succumb to those peer pressures, it's been challenging. But once you find a way to either respectfully, or if they don't listen, a little disrespect, to kind of get them to just understand that this is my thing, this is my path, this is my life, and you need to respect that.
Similar to Ken, I've kind of experienced kind of like the wide gamut of like starting out really thin and then just kind of like discovering the community and then getting really heavy and then losing the weight, my own gain shaming happening at that point. But it would ultimately like turning into muscle gaining, which then kind of got really influenced by the community where I was letting them in the driver's seat, where a lot of the community's like kind of like peer pressure, like to rather than going after the muscle gaining route, it really kind of turned into this like really aggressive dirty bulk where it's just like I just got fat, which wasn't the ultimate goal, but because of that kind of like that fear of that negative criticism that was going to come out of just pursuing that muscle gaining track, it really led me to kind of putting aside my own goals, my own desires for my within the community and really going after other people's wants. I think another part of it was just like I get asked so much, like, what's your number? Like, what number do you want to achieve? And it's just like, it took me a while to just like finally figure out, like, I don't have a number. Like, my goals are how I feel and how I look. That's how I first approached my goals, was just like, I'm going to get to 220, no matter what that looked like. But it led me down this really bad path of like, just kind of like following other people's sexual desires rather than following my own physical goals.
All of this is immediately so powerful, right? Like, and I think we're hearing an immediate gamut of experiences. People of a mistaking identity, people presuming identity, people trying to challenge you to change the very reason you do what you do, right? And Tim, I know we've kind of talked about this. I don't know if we said this specifically on the podcast, but it's this idea that we're starting to reach here at this time in the podcast where it feels like we're constantly referring back to previous episodes now, where it kind of feels like, it's not to say we're repeating ourselves, but there are these constant themes coming through of community and, specifically the episode I Am Enough, the idea that, we need to do more as a community to substantiate what we as individuals feel. Tim, to refer to you here, what has your journey been like with that?
I mean, I've talked about it before, but I'll say it again for the sake of the episode, that like I get like microaggressions is what I tend to call them, is like the kind of thing where someone could leave a comment saying, oh, you look good, but you could be bigger, or sorry, you're still not fat enough for me, or you need to keep pushing or eating more, whatever they come up with, honestly. And sometimes this would happen even when I was at work. They'd be like, well, are you eating something right now? And I'm like, no, I'm a nurse. I'm on my feet. I'm walking up and down the hallways. I'm doing rounds. I'm checking in on patients. Like, I can't be, what am I supposed to do? Have a hamburger in one hand? That's not very professional. you know? Um, so yeah, I've had my ups and downs with it too. As far as like other people projecting what they want onto me, I don't think I've ever taken that very seriously, because I know me, and I know me pretty well, and I know what I want to be. So I don't really adopt that much. It's just sort of like, oh, they're projecting a fantasy on me. That's fine. But
I actually want to zoom in here real quick, Adam. Something you said right at the start of your moment. You said the gain shaming you inflicted on yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously a lot of what we're going to talk about today is, influences from outside, of course, we know, but that's actually a very powerful statement. The gain shaming we inflict on ourselves. And this is a very, look, I'm not going to say it's uniquely queer, but, on a slightly more macro scale, we are queer individuals here on this podcast. This is something that is trained in us by the wider queer community to feel a sense of having to do, no matter what space we fit into. Like, again, referencing the I am enough, it feels very like if you are in a smaller body, you have to be the smallest. If you are going to be the chub, you have to be the fattest. If you're going to be a muscle bear, you've got to be the most jacked. And I imagine that there's probably elements as well when it comes to, representing elements of race or disability or femininity. If you're going to be the thing, you have to be the most thing of the thing, otherwise you're going to fall between the cracks.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Men compete with each other. It doesn't matter if we're gay, straight, bi, pan, float. Like, men compete with each other. And I don't know if this is. I don't think it's bred into us. Like, I don't think this is natural instinct, but it's definitely conditioning from the moment you come out of the womb.
To put it to Josh and to Ken here, I mean, have either of you experienced for yourselves a sense of that internalized gain shaming?
I can't necessarily think of an exact instance where something has happened. I know I've had my own internal turmoils, if that's what you're referencing, where just trying to accept what's changing for myself, it's a lot. And I think that over the years and of the individuals that I've met along the way, I've learned that the hardest part is just accepting it for yourself and being true to yourself for what you're wanting. And when we deal with this outside perspective of things from others, we tend to get pressure to tend to, like how Adam mentioned, we get into that. Oh, well, maybe I need to shift a little bit to appease what these other individuals are thinking. And I mean, it's happened to me. I know it's probably happened to everyone. Like we're kind of beating a dead horse here, but yeah, it's challenging, and I kind of wonder, and maybe you guys can kind of try and help spread some light on this, but like why does everyone have to put so much pressure on everyone? Why can't we just be happy and be supportive of everyone, even if it's like how Josh was insecure about where he was when he started to getting those first 30 to 40 pounds? Like that's a great milestone to be able to be comfortable for yourself. Like we should be supporting that individual for making those gains, even if it's not the 150 pounds that everyone wants to see, because fantasies are fantasies for a reason. This is a reality, this is our life, and these are ways that we have to try and support and uplift everyone, not break them down.
Say it again, put it on a t-shirt and sell it for $20. That's it right there. Every pound's a fucking miracle, right? Like, we in this community are some of the only people in the entire human species who participate in any kind of narrative that substantiates what we want to do. So it doesn't matter whether you are gaining 150, it could be 10, it could be 1. If you are participating in this journey, you are a gainer and your gains are valid. And it is incredible that amongst ourselves we find it possible that we could look at someone putting on real weight in real time and go, lol, not good enough. Like, are you fucking kidding me? It is wild.
So I have this pet theory now in this conversation that, like, okay, so for those of us who are, I don't want to say it's just for the gainers, because really it's for anybody who's in the community, but like specifically for the gainers, right? Our joy is wrapped up in that weight gain, and that joy is delivered to us by members of the community, right? And yes, we find internal joy, but like it's fair to say that a great deal of the joy does come from the response we get from the community. So imagine that the position that kind of puts us in is like our joy is doled out by our peers, and it's determined on what they think of us, or if they think we're good enough, if they think that we look hot enough. Like, it's kind of a weird, deranged system we've created here.
Something I want everyone to be aware of on this podcast, outside of it, everywhere in the world. Joy should not come from gaining. Gaining should come from joy, right? Because ultimately, when I think back on the experiences that, like, when I was an underage person fantasizing about fat, I was never thinking, ooh, I can't wait to be bound in bed, ass up in the air, pigtail butt plug, all this kind of ish. Like, that was like, that's now my Saturday night. But that wasn't what drove young me when I had these fantasies. The picture in my mind was, this scene of like a sumptuous feast at the table. It was a plate piled high with food, and not just slop, but like every mouthful would be delicious and bespokely made and flavorful. And like, that's where this belly comes from this joy that comes from consuming food and living such a happy life. So this is why there's a dissidence there, because ultimately what this comes down to is feeling like we have to jump into the same system that is already in place in this community, because it just takes its cues from the outside world where people are already doing that. But before we go any further, Josh, we want to come back to you here. What have your experiences been with that internalized gain shaming?
I think it can relate to a lot of just what Tim, you brought up in your theory, and also what you expounded on, James. But I mean, if I bring it back to the beginning of, again, to the beginning of my gaining journey, then when you feel that kind of like not belonging, or when you feel that dissatisfaction or body dysmorphia or whatever you want to call it for yourself, when you begin your journey or anywhere along the way, like mine stemmed much from the current friends that I have, which thankfully I don't have them anymore, that they were much a part of like the larger LGBTQ community that was just looking to have like the conventionally attractive, like muscular, quote unquote, healthy looking body or whatever, and was chasing that for way too long, being unhappy in the size that I was and everything. And as you finally find that community and engage with that community, like I did about 3 years ago now, which thank goodness, when you finally find that community, then you are searching for that same kind of validation that you've always held inside, but you're not able to give enough to yourself. I mean, especially for my extroverted ass, like I need a lot of like help and feedback and talks with people that think like-minded like I do. Also part of the reason why I'm so passionate about creating community within this gainer community and making it in a healthy way, like people that want to support each other, and we do value that feedback, but feedback in a way that is edifying to all of us and all of our unique individual goals that are all different, that some of us want to lose, some of us want to gain, some of us need muscles, some of us need literally to just like maintain the exact status quo and just talk to other people that are passionate about fat, and that's fine. But like me along the way, like early on, I think that I needed that feedback and I needed that cycle of validation and things. But unfortunately for me, I think that it fell kind of into like what Tim was talking about, that it was more about like putting it on as fast as I could, or I was being more celebrated for putting it on fast. And like that in itself is not bad. But for me, in my body, it was not amazing because I developed like acid reflux, like pretty terribly, to the point that it like caused me vocal injury. And that was something that like I feel like the more I asked other gainers about, they were like, "Oh, omeprazole, oh, blah, blah, blah," like all these, medicinal things. The only thing that no one talked about was like, "Hey, have you tried not stuffing yourself every time you sit down to eat? Like that would also help you." And it's contrary to like what we do in this community. But all that to say, my first, 50 pounds or whatever that I've gained probably would have come along a lot easier had I just gotten that kind of advice of a person who is like thinking of the whole, not just the gain. You know what I mean?
100%. I mean, this is really the crux of this thing we're talking about, gain shaming. It isn't just, oh, someone said something to me that upset me. It's also the reality of systemic subjugation to ideas that don't actually benefit us, lead to vomiting and damaging vocal cords, which is inherently not what we're looking for when we're trying to gain weight. So when people love to turn around and be like, oh, I just wanted to help, I was just trying to, baby, no, you weren't. Cut the crap. We weren't doing that. You were trying to be something, and it ain't cute. Don't fucking do it. But I think this is so important, and I want to say thank you here, everyone sharing your experiences so far, and what we'll get into here today. One sec. I think a lot of this comes down to the idea, like what you were saying, Josh, that this is just what this community does, and I think it kind of roots into this idea of like, we do this for ourselves because we want to be the quote unquote good gainer. Like we have to show that we're like really investing ourselves, especially if, Tim and we don't gain very fast. Josh, you're very tall. Even if you make progress, people are like, oh, it doesn't look like you're making progress. And so you feel this obligation to have to show like you put it like, you see, I'm proving it's not me. I promise I'm doing everything I possibly can to get fat. Don't tell me I'm faking it. Like, do we feel like that's a part of this as well?
It does sometimes feel like we have to put on a performative thing for the sake of maintaining the attention. Yes.
We'll also raise a point that no matter what community you're a part of, no matter what circles, that like living a fantasy is hot. Like I think that all of us would love to feel that kind of like deep validation for ourselves, but I don't think it really goes as deep as it like is fantasized to be. Does that make sense?
I think there's just like there's definitely some sort of like addictive property to that kind of attention. It's just like when you start, it just kind of like when it comes in waves, it's just like you want that wave to kind of keep coming. And just like it just feels good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that, because it's like we're like, you end up looking for that validation with being able to, myself for example, stuff 10,000 of food into your stomach and not get sick. But those are things that I do still enjoy, but I also see the negative ramifications of that because, I've been riding this high for probably a month or so now, when I have another goal that's going to happen that most people aren't really going to be that quote unquote happy about to hear. But these are things that have to happen for myself. I mean, any sane person knows that you can't continually eat fast food 3 times a day and still be able to live a healthy life. Like, we all have to have that balance. And it's the gain shaming that comes in the backside of it, of people just not understanding that a lot of this, yes, you may be able to do it a day or two here, but that's about it. Most of us, that's about all you can handle. Maybe it's just one meal a day. But for those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to do and kind of give into that a little bit more, individuals just need to understand that there's a threshold that has to be reached, and y'all know me, I'm one that I will tell you right away, like, no, there's no more that's going to happen. Like, I've had instances where, yeah, you think you're going to be able to do something, but reality hits in, your body sets in, and you just, what, fuck it. This is what it is, and we're going to go from here. If you guys don't like it, we'll go find somebody else to follow.
And I know we've dabbled a little bit around this topic on the podcast, that kind of element of popularity, right? Like, what drives popularity in our community? And I think it is an adherence, really, to the tropes that we've set aside and said, this is what's the most important. And I mean, is that potentially an influence where when you come into the community space, regardless of your intentions and motivations, you can see very quickly what people are giving their focus and attention to and what they're not. And perhaps if people think to themselves, oh, if I adhere to maybe some of the critiques that people give, if I listen to that internal monologue, maybe I'll get a little bit of that for myself. Do you think that might also be a motivation for people?
I'm going to jump in because I've got my thoughts going, but I do think that is a motivation. However, people need to remember that use it as motivation, but stick to your guns. Like, I know when I first kind of shifted from the muscle gainer into just a full-fledged gainer, if you want to call it. I don't really like to classify or label myself, but I realized how much more attention I was getting when I was showing my stuffed gut versus when I was showing my workouts. And it's not to say that I don't work out, because y'all know me, I still enjoy it. Yes, I'm taking an off month, but hey, we all have those. But it's doing what you like and indulging in that, but not losing sight of the end goal. And that's what I think happens to a lot of individuals, because I've seen it where they start going down that rabbit hole of feeding into that status quo of what a true quote unquote gainer is, but then they see what's happening, they've lost sight of themselves, and then they disappear, or however you want to phrase that. But I will say, of the friends and followers that I've made over the years, I still have so many legit, genuine friends that I've made over this journey that understand and respect me for where I'm at, where I've been, where I'm going.
So if you spend any time, I mean, especially like, I think this was my introduction into like really participating in the gaming community, was Instagram. From following with my personal Instagram for a while, of like some people being like, I eventually need to separate these things and put like a separate account for all these like, thirst comments that I'm leaving. But if you spend any amount of time in the comment section of any like, famous gainer or whatever, if you want to call them that, I feel like, James, you mentioned like a term that we should use for them, or like that was kind of more common. What was it?
So I think in the community, we tend to say Grommr celebrity, but I like to try and phrase it more as being high profile.
That makes a lot more sense, yeah. But a high profile person, a Grommr celebrity, or however you may self-identify if you are one of those people. But you scroll through their comments, and there's amongst the million flame emojis, then there's usually like comments like Tim was talking about, like, oh, here's to the next 50 pounds, or like people are like never really satisfied with even the gains they've already made, or like projecting their fantasies a lot. And you see what people are more willing to participate with in a social media context. And it's interesting to me to like have talked to other people after going on like Ground of the Seas or something. You meet a lot more people in person, you have more in-person conversations. And I feel very much so that like the social aspects flips from being much more fantasy based online to being much more like, oh, so what do you do for work? What do you do? And it seems like a no-brainer, of course, but like you learn that people are so much more worthwhile to talk to than you thought from just their online presence. or things like that. I don't even know exactly where I'm going with this, but like the people that get a lot of the attention sometimes are not the most worthwhile people or the people that you will connect with the most and like actually create that community.
I think what you're talking about is basically demystifying the community itself. When it's just an image on a screen, you don't know who they are, you've never spoken to them, you don't know what their personality type is like or the things that they like to talk about or any of that stuff. It's very easy to get this detachment to them and just be like, oh, this is someone that is like I put on a pedestal now and they're practically untouchable. And then when you meet them in real life and you find out that they're usually a lot more down to earth than that, and you see them as a real person, it does flip the way that you have viewed them previously. And it's something that I wish everyone could do. And I kind of think that if the community could get to a place where more people are willing to mingle and socialize with each other, this might diminish. But unfortunately, Grommr are not always easy to get to or cheap to go to.
The community has become, never did I think, like when I really discovered the community, this is like going back 2010, 2011, and like Grommr's like infancy, did I ever think it was going to, one, last this long, and two, kind of like develop into this, have this like stream of like almost like influencers within the community, both on Grommr itself and then on social platforms. And with anything like sort of like influencer mentality, it's just like the need to like constantly putting out new content. And part of that new content is like the need to like show progress. So like whether it's either you're gaining just fat, whether you're trying to gain muscle, it's just like people get bored really quickly. And when they get bored, that's like you either start to see that following either start to die off or people just start to kind of like move on from it. So it just like really becomes this kind of like hustle almost just to like kind of like keep up with, again, what other people want from you. Each one is kind of, it's a marathon. It's not gonna like happen overnight. You can make it happen quicker if you want to, but it's not necessarily going to be the healthiest way to do it. You're going to end up hurting yourself more than you're going to be benefiting in the long run.
I like this. I like conversations that center on really what we can do to look after ourselves, because once again, we talk about this all the time on the podcast. I don't know a single other thing that exists where people talk about how to care for yourself in this community, let alone how to care for someone else, let alone how to have good conversations about these things, let alone even having conversations where you acknowledge, I don't feel great when people treat me not great in this space. So this is wonderful. I love this. I want to ask you all here to be a little bit salacious, shall we say, in this regard. What would you say is like the greatest example of like a gain shaming ick that you find that people tend to give to you the most?
I would say for myself, I just can't stand it. It's kind of a two-parter, but I'll make it quick. Is I can't stand when I make a post about my sports that I enjoy playing or the gym that I enjoy to go to, and the like complete disregard for what brings me joy and saying, "Oh yeah, you should stop that and just go get some more McDonald's and get fatter." Or kind of like how Tim said earlier about how, yeah, you may have posted that you've made a 5 pound gain, but then someone saying either, oh, that's not enough, or in throwing out an astronomical, like unrealistic number. Like that is just the biggest, oh, just gets my blood boiling because it's like, y'all are not listening to who we are as people. You're just throwing your own personal crap at us. And it's just like, nope, immediately shut off.
To piggyback off of yours, I think that my greatest ick that, especially that I've seen on some of my posts, but I see so much more on like, Gain Celebrities or whatever we have, Grommr Celebrities, yeah. Whenever I see somebody like you post about your gain or like, oh, I was so stuffed after dinner or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then like the first top pinned comment is like, well, let's see you at the next like 50 pound above or the next 100 pound above. And you're like, okay, albeit like that is like kind of an attainable number and it's like in fantasy world, like when is enough? When is it like just, yes, I'm celebrating you in the thing that you just posted because that is what you are looking for. Like it's just like not living with the validation of like the human being as they are. And that's what gives me the ick.
For me, I think my biggest ick is like because I've experienced it and I've also like seen it with other people. It's just like the instant someone poses just the thought of losing weight, it is just this like volatile response from the community. And it's just like you're sinning against the community. It's just like this instant pushback. People, and it's just like, why would you ever do this? Like, what do you like? What's the purpose of this? And I just like went through this whole process like last year where it's just like, again, I went kind of coming off of that like unhealthy, like dirty bulk phase. I kind of like lost it all and then some. And it was just like the entire time, it was just like this like constant like wave of negativity. And it was just like, it's just very demoralizing because it's just like this, I set this like new goal for myself and like I have to feel bad about this. I have to feel bad about why I'm like trying to like improve myself to like refocus to like start a new goal. Um, so I think that like skinny shaming is just like, or just like any sort of like fitness goal, really just kind of like that's where my it comes in. It's just like this is this is for me. This is not for you.
I think similarly, I'm gonna go with unrealistic expectations. I've told this story before. I was having a real cute chat with an encourager. It was all good. Lived in London, all sounding great. And then he goes on and says, "Yeah, 'cause I'm gonna feed you 3 whole pizzas." And immediately I'm like, because in an instant, I realize that what you're saying, it's not just that okay, let me be clear about this. For anyone who does not get why I just went, because I think everyone on this call knew exactly what I meant. It is not just that, oh, you have an expectation for me to perform for you. It's like the fact that you don't know that 3 pizzas is not like humanly possible for most people tells me that you do not have an iota of a clue about like typical human capacity, let alone gainer human capacity, let alone you want dick or butthole or some kind of something in this situation. You won't put that kind of grease in my system. What do you think is going to happen? Like, this tells me you don't have a goddamn clue about what's going to happen. And then, wouldn't you know it, within the next 2 minutes of dialogue, this man shows his ass, being like, a real gainer could do like 3 pizzas or like 6 Big Macs. And I'm like, no.
We're not all competitive eaters. Like, we're not all in training for eating competitions. Like, there are those of us that do that, but not all of us do it.
But again, that's the people who do that. And that's another thing. Like, we have all got different, like, not to say skill sets within gaming, but there are plenty of dudes on Instagram who are all like, I am a pig. I like to eat slop off the floor with my piggy tail butt plug up in the air as I oink, oink, oink and eat all this food. Baby, go and talk to them because they are get up and ready for it. I'm a lady. I want you to take me out for a nice meal. Take me, buy me dessert. And then we'll go for a little water with like a little coffee, a little aperitif after.
Don't worry about me. I'm not a lady. You can just do fast food and a hand job in the car, and that'll be good enough for me.
Yeah, what you don't know is there's that show called like Trailer Park Boys or something, and like Tim was the guy where it's that thing where it's like, are you whoring yourself out for cheeseburgers again? And the guy's like, a man's gotta eat, don't he? Like, that's Tim. But on that point, Tim, what's your ick?
I've talked about the microaggressions and all the other crap that bothers me, and it just seems like it's blasé at this point. It's like, but I've gotten some bizarre things that have happened too. Like, I've even had somebody commented on one of my posts like, "Oh, I liked you better skinny," and I was like, "Then why the hell are you here? Why are you even following me? I very clearly spelled out what I was doing," and then I think they replied, "Good point," and I guess they left.
So I want to ask you all something here, right? Is I think a beautiful part of what we're sharing today is ways where not only can we look after ourselves, but we can look after one another as well. And so thinking about, we're talking a little bit about that specific moment when we enter the community where I think a lot of that impact happens, where maybe we're being convinced left or right what we should be doing with ourselves. Should we as a community be making more effort with newbies to take more measured approaches to gaining? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. I mean, it's like if I were to think back to baby gainer Josh, or even like, when I was much younger and probably saw like Grommr sort of stuff, or like what are the other ones, Beefy Frat and other websites that just like existed. And I'm imagining like the culture that even existed then, had I entered at that point, what would I, as a baby gainer or like a young person discovering that that was like a sexual attraction for me, needed to see exampled. And
It
at
was
the
the
very
Wild
least of
West,
it,
baby. It was the Wild West.
but I think that it would be, at least like for me, of what I would have wanted to see is at least like just people upholding and celebrating each other just like as they are. Like no matter how thin, no matter how large, no matter if you're a bloater and like you just like kind of like gain and lose the same 10 pounds, or you don't even necessarily gain, you're like an inflator like I do sometimes too. And we've talked about that in previous podcast episodes. But it's like just like seeing so many multifaceted aspects of our community celebrated beyond just like gaining, beyond muscle gaining, beyond like all the like the tangible, physical, visual, because we are men, visual like aspects of it. And just like celebrating people for like, yeah, you feel great in your skin, like good for you. How can I help encourage you? Or like, how can I celebrate with you? Or can I send you a donut as like a prize? Or I don't know.
You can always send me donuts. I
Bitch.
would like. I just want to kind of piggyback. I mean, you've made some very valid points there, Josh, because like I pride myself on my involvement in the community of always responding to as many people as I can, because I never asked to be, I don't want to call myself popular. I'm more of a humble person, but I've been told that I'm that way. However, I always try and make sure to reach out to everyone. Like even when Adam was going through his cutting phase, I always made sure to kind of check up on him and compliment him on his progress and how he's doing, because those are the things that get lost, and it's the small things that matter more than the bigger things. And so whenever individuals reach out and say, "Oh, how did you get so big so fast? And how did you do this? And how do you eat that much? And all that and everything else," is I always shift the conversation back to them. I'm like, well, what are your goals? What's your height? What's your weight? What are you hoping to attain? Do you want to keep your muscle mass? Do you want to just get fat? Like, to get them thinking about things for themselves as opposed to having that fetish aspect of things instead of the lifestyle that we've all created.
Mm.
Have something else to add, just even based on that, because like I know that not for everybody, at least like becoming an event organizer has been very enlightening, because I talk to so many people in my local area that I'm like basically like low key begging them to come to these events, because I'm like, hey, I see that you're lonely. I see that we talk, but like, why are you not coming to like participate in community? And for some people, I know that it's really, really hard for them to actually like show up in person due to anxiety or due to whatever other reasons, or their job is really important and they can't show face in public. Totally get it. But even like in an online arena, like you were talking about, Ken, like where you can shift the conversation to help them participate in it more. Or it's like not necessarily about leaving comments, it's more about just like more critically thinking like in yourself, like what do you want? How can this also involve you and not just like fetishize someone else? So it becomes a little bit more like the empathy element is more there and more present.
I wish there was like again, baby Adam coming into the community. I wish there was someone there just kind of like hold my hand a little bit and be like, this is what gaining is. Don't listen to these guys. Don't go into that crowd because they're just petty queens. Again, kind of like, again, I don't like to keep going back to this, but like going through that like weight loss phase, I really kind of quickly learned who my friends were in the community. And it really taught me to like change the people, places, and things in my life. So like again, like Ken, like I can't say how much I appreciate your support through that and like everyone else that supported it. But yeah, it's just like you quickly realize like who you do and who you don't want in your circle. And I think to kind of like make that important for like people new in the community, just like really know your tribe, like and really kind of hold them dear, because otherwise like you can get lost really easily in this community. I've had that a couple times and I've really had to kind of like scrape up the who these people are and be like, okay, I know who you are. I know I can come back to you and like I know you are my true people in this community.
100%. And yeah, I just want to point there's a couple of things I think we need to point out right here, because I know you said like, oh, to keep coming back to this experience, but I think the fact that you keep coming back to it points to just how important and crucial it is for us to understand how much effect can be had when someone is new to the community, and how crucial it is to get that right. And I think that speaks to our need for mentorship, which we've talked about on the podcast before, our need for in-person community, like Josh has been talking about. And the second point I want to bring up is this: people listening right now, what did we just see? Ken and Adam talking about their very real relationship with one another, which is rooted in the care for one another. And they have an opportunity here to share that with us. And thank you both for sharing your sides of the story. But this is what this is it. This is real life. This is the whole fucking point. This is why we're doing this. Everybody needs to understand that to take the time out of your day to give a flying fuck about another human being in this community, not just because they make your dick wet, but because you give a fuck about them. It can never be understated how impactful and important that is. And we need more of it. That's really what we're coming down to here, right? So
it's amazing how just friendship is going to be the answer to the problem. Just be friendly. Act like a friend. Do things that friends would do. Care.
Are you trying to say that, like, fucking My Little Pony Friendship is Magic was actually the answer all along, and we were having an issue with bronies, but actually they had the whole fucking story figured out? Like, is this actually the message of today's fucking episode?
Wouldn't that be a gag?
Yeah. I've never actually seen the show, so because that's the tagline, right? And everyone, like, rinsed it.
Yeah, I think I watched a couple of episodes of it once, but I didn't really understand what was going on. I'm used to the 90s version.
It's like a very, very specific spring off of, I think something, Ken, you mentioned a while back about how this is like something, I think it was literally your first statement there of what is so difficult about, like, just when you experience gain shaming and things. And also something that, like, my partner and I have talked about quite a bit as well in our relationship, and also the fact that, like, kink is a part of our relationship, but that when you think that, like, gaining is probably one of the only kink things that you really wear, you don't get to take it off, you don't get to put it in a closet, so to speak. And you also live with it, and it may also have health implications, and you have to make other choices about that. And, like, that fluctuates with your mental health, and it can, like, affect that perhaps more than other kink culture things. So what am I getting at? Like, either it could go two ways. What is one way that you feel like you have not felt that support as, like, living with this as, like, a real person, like, this is your body and this is changing, and by societal standards, then you can face some flack for that? Or also the flip side of it, like, what is some way that someone has shown you that in a positive light and really, like, shown care for you, shown that friendship that we really need because this is something we wear?
That's a deep question. I like it. Honestly, for myself, it's quite obvious the size that I've gotten. And like you said, there's no way of hiding anything. I'm fortunate enough that I have a good support group local. I have friends to go and hang out with. I don't have as many nearby gainer friends. So that's for myself where I utilize my social media for that. But within that group of friends that I've made online, I have many that I can turn to. I have some that I throw ideas off back and forth in terms of basically getting unbiased opinions on how they view myself, because it's not that I need their acceptance, but it's nice to hear that when I'm feeling like a heifer, I get told, you still got a solid muscle foundation. Like, you can see it there. Like, you're not, like, yes, you're big, but you're not that big. So things like that do definitely help for myself. And then, like, some of the internal things that I deal with is just keeping that constant balance of making sure that I'm having fun with it, making sure that I'm not putting in quote unquote work for it, because once it shifts to that, that's where it just, I kind of shut off, and I don't really care to do things like that, because those are, I guess that could kind of spring back to a previous question and say that's another one of the icks for me, is like whenever I have to work to do something for someone, like, yeah, no, fuck that. I do that for 8 hours a day alone, and I don't get paid enough for that shit.
I want to ask here, as we begin to come near towards the end of the episode, I think we've shared so much wonderful truth today in terms of how these things really do impact us. This is the reality, no matter what direction our gaining is going in, no matter how long we've been a part of this journey. The reality is gain shaming affects each and every one of us. And I think no matter how long ago maybe some of those triggers were implemented, they stick with us to this day. So I think it's important that we keep this conversation going. I want to ask each of you, when you think about what this community could look like when we overcome something like gain shaming, what are some things that each and every one of us could do to help move the needle in the right direction?
Get you some in-person friends that like celebrate you and know about either the kink stuff, or they don't even have to know like what a gainer is. They just have to know that you are in a bulking phase for a long time and that they can help celebrate that with you. Even my chosen family knows that like I'm just in a long bulking phase, and they celebrate that with me because that's what they know is my body goal for myself. So I think that like being transparent with you, with the people that matter to you, is really important.
I think that in-person interaction really kind of goes a long way. I've only been able to go to a couple like Grommr, and it's just like it's kind of a game changer when you're actually able to like have those real-time talks rather than through a screen. It really kind of like it changes the entire relationship you have with the community at large, and it's just like it's just like it makes you feel more belonging into it. It's not like you just have to sign off throughout the day. It kind of like solidifies those like true friendships that you have, and you can even form new ones that you never thought you were ever going to be able to make with people. Something that could be hopefully improved upon is just like, again, easier said than done. It's just like applauding people for just making their own decisions. Like really, if whatever they say they want to do, it's just like rather than instantly giving your opinion or like your own like forcing your own sexual desires on somebody. It's just like kudos to you for like knowing what you want, like rather than just like going off of the assumptions of other people in the community.
For myself, I think that using the popularity aspect of things to shine a positive light and a supportive light on things. Always, we've mentioned it earlier in the show of, supporting those small gains and supporting what everyone else like individually decides to do, not pressing our personal agendas on others and respecting where everyone has came from and is going. I think would play a huge role in this acceptance within the community of just letting people be them and not pressuring everything on them.
I do think that if you're able to get out and really experience meeting someone else in person or a group of other people, it really does help. I know that we've kind of harped on that a bit, but it's just a different kind of experience, and it's very liberating. It's very validating. It's very, I mean, just to be able to be around people who understand you on that level, if nothing else. I mean, because it's no guarantee that you're going to make friends, but at least you don't have to hide something about yourself that you've been hiding for a long time. You're able to be open about it. You're able to have an honest conversation about it. And, if you're the gainer and you've been going through regular society sucking in your gut, I can't tell you how good it feels to not have to do that when you're around your people. You can just let it hang and no one gives a shit. And you find that like group confidence kind of rubs off on you, because when I went on the first time I went on Grommr the Seas, I had a pretty skimpy bathing suit, and I was kind of worried about, what are people going to say with me and my big gut hanging out and all this. The confidence that I had just being around my peers, my tribe, it was amazing. Like I was just walking past people, I didn't give a shit. If you didn't like the way I looked, you could look the other way. So I think that yeah, that is important to try and actually foster a sense of community.
100%. My honest suggestion to people is try and devote some time to someone who isn't popular. Try and devote some time to someone who you don't immediately want to have sex with. Try and start a conversation with someone who maybe isn't the immediate that you think that you should have a conversation with. Because I feel like when we say to ourselves as individuals, oh, well, I have my motivations. I know what I'm about. Like I'm good. What does it matter? I want to suck all their dicks. Like that's fine, and it is fine. You can feel an attraction to all these people. You can acknowledge that it's fine. But we can also acknowledge that, as we've explored in this episode, we all have biases towards a certain aesthetic, a certain group of people that maybe leave people out of that conversation for a number of different reasons. And if we make an effort to try and lift up some people who look different, some people who maybe deserve a little bit more shine because they're just not going to get it in our community, and let's be real, you've got a picture of who that person looks like in your head. You already know the kind of person I'm talking about. Give that person some love. Let's support one another genuinely, without this potential reward of sex or nude photography or something else. Let's give actual genuine love and care and friendship, and I think that will be a big help. Well, I think this has been a really incredible week. I mean, I think I say that most weeks, but truly I mean it. It's always so powerful to have so many people, and I think even the example of like these roundtable episodes we have, period, I think they're so powerful to get so many different people together at different stages of their gaming journey, different types of gaming journey, different backgrounds and experiences that inform and influence how we do and what we do and why we do it. I think this is so important. And I think when we talk about the idea of something like game shaming, something that ultimately makes us feel like we're not doing what we're doing correctly, I think it's so beautiful to be able to share that with one another and feel a sense of acceptance, and knowing that every person in that space sees you for who you are. There is no performance, there is only love and acceptance. So to that point, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for being here today. What an incredible episode. Where can our listeners find each of you online?
Everyone can find me with the same username, basically across all platforms: OnlyFans, Grommr, Instagram, you name it. But I keep it simple: thiccboigains across the board.
You can find me on Instagram as hungry.hungryhimbo. You can find me on Grommr as whyhellohairy, as in like the hair on your head. And yeah, we'll see you on the socials.
If you're looking, you can find me on Grommr at beefmode on Instagram. You can find me at lebeardedgent. And if you're feeling hungry, you can check out my food Instagram, bearded lady.
Fabulous. Well, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at thiccmouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note or become a financial supporter of the show, you can find the links in the show notes, and you can always write to us at thethicradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye,
Goodbye,
fatties.
ladies and gentlethems, all the fatties.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Logitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.